I think it's really interesting, and it highlights how difficult it is for people to understand what racism is, what misogyny is. And, our community faces challenges in highlighting that because we don't have symbols that necessarily are tied or are instantly identifiable as a racist behavior, right? If you see a swastika graffiti on a wall, you know that is a racist act, right? So I think, it is different for us in that sense, and that to deny the fact that these places were identified and are perceived as Asian places of employment, but also to remember that this person deliberately sought out these places. News reports reported that he knew who worked there. He had frequented these places. It's not a coincidence in my mind that this person targeted these places for a reason. And I think, certainly the long historical legal structures allowing us to treat people as foreigners, to treat people as disposable, and I think one of the things that I didn't talk about yet is also, the fetishization of Asian women and how it's tied to this idea of disposability, that Asian women are always seen to be in enclaves, are meant to be experienced pleasurably in the dark corners of our society, so to speak, but that they're disposable, that you go back to your regular life and conduct yourself differently in a different way. And I think it's telling that these places are viewed this way, but also that they are seen as places where a person could have thought that they could get away with this kind of violent behavior because of the people that they were targeting. I think you can't just look at this incident in isolation or without the context of the last few years. There is an incredible increase in the amount of verbal, physical, violent assaults and harassment and abuse that Asian people have experienced in the last few years. And so it is not far-fetched to think that this incident flows from that as well. And you don't need to have an aggressor or a perpetrator announce that this is a hate crime, or that's not the requirement. It's not a requirement of racism to have the perpetrator say, yes, I did it for this reason. And I think to deny that, what really needs to happen is to view it from the experience of those that are experiencing this event. Lives were lost, but also the community views this as an assault on their community. And I think that's an important thing to acknowledge, that it's not the perspective of the perpetrator that's important. It's the perspective of the community that is experiencing this violence, that is suffering because of their loved ones. And so I encourage everyone to flip this narrative and to say, how is it affecting this community? And we have been very vocal from the beginning about how we view this assault, and that it doesn't come out of thin air. It comes from years of experiencing a variety of hate and violence. That's a great question. And I think, it's interesting because there's a lot of advocacy organizations that have done this important work. So, first off the bat is, my area of expertise is in law. So I think there's a lot of work that can be done in policy and legal reform, legalizing sex work, changing the narrative about how women can take agency over their own choice in work, and protecting them in their chosen places of work. Secondly, giving permanent resident status to migrant workers. That will eliminate a lot of potential opportunities for abuse, for harassment, for accessing labor rights. Third, I think, I want to acknowledge that a lot of us feel privileged enough to go to the police for help or to make complaints, but a lot of us don't in our community. And I want to acknowledge that, our Indigenous and Black community members, and how they do not experience interactions with the police in a safe way. And in order for us to move together as a community to think about, decarceral approaches to our criminal justice system, but also reducing interactions with police and looking at alternative community mechanisms to address hate, to address conflict in our societies.